Very excited to be able to speak with the NFL Network or NFL Network's chief national reporter, Steve Wyche, joining us. Steve, before we went to break, in the last segment, we were sharing with each other why we got into this business. Like, what obsession did we have with football or basketball or radio or sports in general that got us into this business? For someone who's been as unbelievably as successful as you, where did it start for you? What got you in to know I want to cover football?
Probably about 8th grade when I realized I was no good at math.
Yes.
In terms of getting to the journalism profession. No, I was really sparked by it. My father, when I grew up in St. Louis, and he was in the sales department at the local NBC affiliate. He had nothing to do with kind of the on-air stuff, but it was just something being around it where, coupled with me being completely inept with numbers and being a former jock, I said, let me try to get into sports writing. And I'm one of the people I can say I'm blessed enough to be able to kind of live out my childhood dreams and ambitions. So that's how I got into it.
Love it.
Steve Wyche is the NFL Network's chief national reporter. Steve, this has been such a wild season in the NFL. And I know, we don't have some of the major teams that are in the mix right now in the playoffs, but it's almost more fun that way. I'm curious on your take of how this season has played off and how we've gotten to where we are.
Yeah, this is we hear it every year, but this is the NFL's dream of parity. And I think with some of the injuries, some teams getting older and going against the old Bill Walsh philosophy of hanging on to guys a year too late instead of getting rid of them a year too early, hit some teams like maybe the Ravens and maybe the Steelers and some of the traditional teams we're used to, the Chiefs. But I also think this new era of quarterbacks. I mean, look at somebody like a Drake Maye coming up and showing up. So I think everything's kind of turning that proverbial page that we've seen happen over and over again, from the Cowboys teams of the 90s to the Niners teams of the 90s to the old Steelers teams that we saw with the old Celtics and Lakers with the NBA. I think this is just kind of the window closing on teams and the windows opening up for others. The great thing with the NFL is those windows can reopen or they can close real quick, like we saw with the Washington Commanders this season when injuries completely gutted its season.
Steve, we are seeing some of the best defenses make it and continue to go further and further, from the Denver Broncos to the Seattle Seahawks. Of course, you got to worry about the Houston Texans, who have been on a massive win streak. When there are this many good defenses, and I know that a cliche is defense wins championships, is it whichever team can get hot offensively or figure it out offensively? Is that what you think is going to be the X factor for putting together an actual Super Bowl run?
That's a great question because, styles make fights. And I think we're going to see in these playoffs because there is no Patrick Mahomes, right? There is no Joe Burrow. Yes, there is a Matthew Stafford. Yes, there is a Josh Allen. But I think it's really going to come down to the matchups. And because of the defenses, and that's another reason I think we're seeing the shift, is defenses caught up to offenses. These great defensive coaches, you're even seeing it in the coach interview cycle, a lot more defensive coaches are getting a swing. So, but I think, when you're playing Houston or you're playing Seattle or you're playing Denver, you better get takeaways. You better find ways to maybe force a defensive score, or your defense has to be great, because if they get 17 points, that might be enough for them because their defenses are just so incredible.
NFL Network's chief national reporter Steve Wyche joined us this morning on Matt and Kayla. So the Niners, we're in Niners country here in Northern California, and man, has it been such a bizarre season because nobody likes the injuries that have happened here. And I think we're starting to try to even find ways to figure out why they're happening. But in the moment right now, this team just keeps winning. How would you rate this in terms of a coaching job that Kyle Shanahan has done?
Okay, it sounds like you're buying into that electrical grid conspiracy. I know that's what you were alluding to. No, look, this has been an incredible job by Kyle Shanahan, and not just because of him scheming guys up. And, this is where you have to give credit to his staff, too, because the hardest thing to do during an NFL season is develop players, right? You have to do that in the offseason, and there's just not much time in the NFL, especially with no pads. And so for them to be able to have a Tatum Bethune to step in for Fred Warner, Malik Mustafa coming off of injury to develop and continue to get better, but then also to plug in veteran players like a DeMarcus Robinson and Juwan Jennings develop and Tonjes, Jake Tonjes step up and play well. It's a real credit to him, to Kyle and his staff developmentally to have guys ready. I never forget fullback Kyle Juszczyk told me that, every year Shanahan will gather the veterans over at dinner at his place or something like that. And he said the message was totally different this year when he said, we're going to be playing more new and inexperienced players than we've ever had to play. So you guys need to help me get them ready from everything on the field, off the field, to preparation, just in case. And Juszczyk said that message reset everybody's focus because it's usually win the division, get to the playoffs, and go from there. And he said that really, as players, it reshaped and reframed their focus because they became the teachers. And the fact that they had that added responsibility re-energized them, and that's why you're seeing also the development and the expectation some of these younger players show up at times like this when all these injuries have hit.
And we have this really unique instance, Steve, where the Seahawks and Niners just played in Week 18. The Niners have played a game in Philadelphia since then, but the last game the Seahawks played was against the Niners, and here they are playing the Niners again, but this time playoffs are on the line. But as we know, postseason football, very different from regular season football, even though the number one seed was on the line there in Week 18. How much do you pull from that game when analyzing this game versus how much do you think both teams can sort of wipe the slate clean, and it's a completely different ball game?
Oh, there's no wiping the slate clean, especially with Juwan Jennings coming out screaming, can't wait to play Seattle after that game. But I do think, they've played each other twice. They know each other well. They know what they want to do. So this is where, to use the old coaching adage, it comes down to execution. There's not going to be a ton of surprises. There will be some. I mean, Seattle's had a few days to kind of work on things to scheme on, especially knowing that the 49ers won't have George Kittle, but they will have Trent Williams back. For the 49ers, it's really going to be how do we function without George Kittle? They played a lot without him, so this isn't going to be a huge surprise. But more so, how do they combat a defensive line that absolutely left their offensive front? Like, it was just carnage the last time they played. I mean, Seattle used 4 guys. 49ers couldn't block them, and it just really stifled their offense. So the Seahawks are like, we left a lot of points on the field. It shouldn't have been as close as it was, 13-3 or whatever it was. And the 49ers are like, hey, if Christian McCaffrey was able to get to that ball, we've got a whole different ball game. So both these teams are going to come in confident. So that's why I'm expecting a great game.
Steve, I don't even know if you know this about me because I've covered the Titans for the last, 8+ years. But
bless your heart.
I know, seriously, Steve, I'm blessing my own heart. But I'm a Seahawks fan, right? Born and raised in Washington State. And it's hard for me because I've never been the biggest Sam Darnold fan. And I know there's a lot of people that are critical of Sam Darnold. In this, this situation with Seattle this year where he's been okay, right? But I think everyone's just waiting for the playoffs. Like, is the playoff Sam Darnold going to show up? Why convince me, maybe, Steve, that I should be a little bit more calmed down about that?
Well, this is where you fall back to Week 18. He only had to throw it 26 times. It was 20 for 26 because Seattle ran the ball. And that's where the 49ers have to absolutely button things up because the past month the Seahawks have been great in the run game, starting with that comeback victory against the Rams, and it started with that big Kenneth Walker run. And ever since then, the dam has burst, right? They are hitting big run after big run after big run. And if somehow San Francisco can either A, get a lead and make Seattle play from behind, or B, slow down that run game, then the game comes on Sam Darnold. And if you're having to have him throw it 30 to 35 times, he's more than capable. He showed that last year at Minnesota when he was throwing it 40 times and he was killing it. But that's what you want to do. And that's going to be the conversation around this game because until he does it, Sam Darnold, week after week, has got proving to do to all of us because we've just seen him at this point in his career struggle, turn the ball over, and that's something that honestly has not gone away. So, again, put the game on him. That's going to be the strategy for the 49ers.
We're speaking with Steve Wyche, the chief national reporter for NFL Network. Steve, the quarterback question about the Seahawks 49ers game between Purdy and Darnold can really be expanded to almost the entire playoff picture. You've got the two, I guess, top of the mountain quarterbacks in Matthew Stafford and Josh Allen. But then, like, there's so many question marks at the quarterback position, so many young, new faces getting their first real opportunities on these massive stages. It's weird that Brock Purdy is considered, I guess, a playoff veteran quarterback amongst this group. The quarterback position, it's called the most important position in sports for a reason. Quarterback play is always so essential in the playoffs. What intrigues you so much about so many new faces at that position in the postseason?
Well, first off, Caleb Williams, because we see how spectacular dynamic he is, but he's such a thrill ride because it's here and there where he's spectacular dynamic, and other times it's like, whoa. But you can say that about Bo Nix, right? You can say that, about C.J. Stroud. The one thing that those guys have that Caleb doesn't is a dynamic stonewall defense. Broncos' defense is great. Houston's defense is great. Darnold's defense is great. Caleb's defense relies on turnovers. And if they don't get them, then that offense has got to do something special. And we know they run the ball very well. We know Caleb is magic in the fourth quarter especially. But, I mean, those are the things. Like, can Josh Allen, everyone was giving this argument, this is his best time to win it because of that uncertainty. I think that's an unfair question because this isn't the best Bills team Josh Allen has played on. And so, they play the Broncos this week in Denver. That's tough sledding, man. That's very tough sledding because that Broncos defense is so great. They've had a week to prepare. So we'll just see. But I just think the fact, and you mentioned it earlier, that three of these teams have such great defenses to insulate not spectacular quarterback play. That's what's going to make these playoffs intriguing.
Steve, you mentioned a lot of quarterback names there, and one that you didn't mention, but we've mentioned their defense clearly because that's the meat of the team is C.J. Stroud. And I'm curious from your perspective because obviously this is going to be his third season going to the playoffs. Now, last year is not good. His rookie season, fell short, but had a great season. Have you seen C.J. get back on the horse in any way this year? I mean, he's obviously been better than last season, but is there a way you feel like he could help this team here in the playoffs? Because it is more so the defense is what has been the meat and potatoes.
Yeah, I mean, look, we saw against Pittsburgh how inconsistent he was. He turned the ball over. I think part of it is they're still kind of figuring out what they want to be offensively because they don't run the ball well. And so the onus is put more so on him. And I think they do call the game sometimes. Because of their defense, like, let's take some shot plays. If we don't get it, our defense will bail us out because of where we are on the field. But I think C.J. Stroud is more than capable. I think they do need to work with the offensive coordinator and their play calling and their play design in the offseason to kind of marry some things to be better because they're not a good red zone team. They're an explosive offense, and once they get going in the explosive game, that's where they win. But otherwise, everything is a struggle, and that's not all on C.J., but he's got to be better at recognizing some things, and they've got to design the offense to help them get through that.
Steve, I grew up like so many people in recent NFL history, couldn't stand the New England Patriots because they're always there. And Tom Brady, who, by the way, I'm a Raiders fan, so now I have to like Tom Brady. But all the years, I know, right? I know. Trust me, I'll take all the prayer you got. But the Patriots were just the staple of postseason football and excellence in the NFL. And here they are now, led by Drake Maye, back in the postseason, had a phenomenal breakout season this year. I'm not trying to make one-to-one comparisons to young Drake Maye and young Tom Brady and the start of that Patriots dynasty. But do you see any similarities between the two, and do you feel like something special is brewing once again there in New England?
I think it's fair to connect the dots. Because the Patriots, they don't beat themselves, right? That was a staple of the Belichick-era Patriots for as long as he was there. They didn't make mistakes. They weren't penalized. They were incredibly disciplined. Defensively, they're very good. And as we know, Tom Brady's first 3 Super Bowls were based on their defense and their kicking game. And they didn't ask a ton out of him. And that's the case right now. That said, Drake Maye makes a ton of plays, especially when he has to. He's very good at overcoming mistakes, but I think it is fair to draw some comparisons, by no fault of Drake Maye's, but I just think of Mike Vrabel coming in and establishing the things that he's established, knowing he's got a stud quarterback. Again, I just think there are some things there that, yeah, you can definitely make some A to B connections.
Steve Wyche joining us, lead reporter for the NFL Network, chief reporter, I should say. And I'm going to rile up the Raiders fans here because we've got plenty of them here in Sacramento as well. And there's a lot of coaches available. Obviously, Mike Tomlin, will see what happens with him, but John Harbaugh is out there. But I don't think those are fits necessarily for the Raiders. I'm curious as to what the Raiders need to do to try to get it right. And they have the number 1 overall pick, but in a way, I'm curious on the coaching side of things, Steve, with you, what you think they should do.
I would think John Harbaugh, Mike Tomlin would be exactly what the Raiders need. Now, Tomlin's not going to, and Harbaugh's not going to come there. And here's why I say this. Like, the Raiders need to fix themselves before they fix their on-field roster. And when I say that, they've got a lot of well-meaning people in that building, but what are they? They're a logo, and there are a lot of slogans that are 40, 50 years old.
Yep.
And again, I'm not saying that in a derogatory way, but when you go to the Broncos, or you go to the Patriots, or you go wherever, kind of what those organizations are about. With the Raiders, we just know that, hey, commitment to excellence, silver and black, and they've got the pirate logo. Their roster's not good, and they need somebody to come in that building, and it's not going to be Tom Brady, to really get this culture going. That's something we thought Pete Carroll could do, and that was an abject disaster.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So we can sit and talk about, you want a great play caller, you want a great this and that. They need to figure out inside the building before anything what their process and what their purpose is. And I just think that's completely been spaghetti noodles thrown on the wall the past couple of years, ever since the John Gruden situation. And then from there, I think they can take their pick of coaches. Okay, if we want to be an offensive team, we're going to get a quarterback. Let's get an offensive-minded leader in here and give them 2 or 3 years to build it. Let's not get jumpy. And that's got to be established, and it's got to go through it. But we've shown that they don't have a lot of patience either. So, again, they've got a long way to go. But I think figuring out their identity is more important than figuring out what they're going to do with the top pick or figuring out who their head coach is going to be.
And, Steve, it's never a bad thing to have the number 1 overall pick, but for all the reasons you just laid out there, it's why there is a nervous energy within my Raiders, cold, dark Raiders heart, and throughout the Raider Nation is, okay, it should be Fernando Mendoza. He, to me, is the clear, concise, consensus number 1 overall pick. But because this organization is desperately looking for someone to lead the change, is there concern that they're going to throw all of those that pressure, that weight on the shoulders of, granted it's a quarterback and there's pressure to be the number 1 pick and pressure to be in the NFL, but if you're going to throw, hey, save our franchise that's been so bad for so long on the shoulders of a kid, for lack of a better term, coming into the league, I don't know if that's the greatest recipe for success.
Well, I mean, look, I wouldn't necessarily agree with that, because look what the Bears and look what the Patriots did. The Patriots were a complete disaster last season in their building, more so than as bad as it was on the field. So what do? They hire a coach who's a leader. They go out and they spend money to bring in offensive linemen. This is Chicago, too. They went out and they changed their offensive line and said, we are going to be tough up front. Here's your identity. We are going to be tough up front. We're going to get the type of defensive players in here. We're going to be absolutely and fundamentally sound. Okay, so they just told you what they're going to be, and they went out and they did it. And in a year, they have flipped. They have flipped exactly what they were. So if the Raiders say we're going to draft a quarterback, we're going to go out and get the 3 best free agent offensive linemen that fit what we want to do offensively, then go do it. And then you're going to use the rest of the draft to continue to fortify that offensive line and steadily put together a defense. Right, it's not as hard as it seems, and you've got, again, the blueprint models and the Patriots and the Bears right there in front of you as to how it could be done.
Steve, where do you feel like the best landing spot is for John Harbaugh at this point? It's just, when that happened, I think we all were a little surprised, but we know the NFL that we're living in now, so things get stale. But where would be the best landing spot fit-wise for Harbaugh?
Well, and you guys see where there's a quarterback, so that would be the Giants. And that's a building that absolutely needs to get someone to come in and wrap their arms around it. I mean, since they fired Tom Coughlin and GM Jerry Reese, they have just failed time and time again to get a head coach who's a leader. But they also haven't had that steady dose of quarterback play, and they've got one in Jackson Dart. I would also say Atlanta, because the new structure the Falcons have put in place with Matt Ryan, a president of football operations. They've got, they've got a higher general manager, which is going to happen soon. It's very similar to where he's coming from in Baltimore, where, yes, he had authoritative power, but he was mainly there just to coach. So I think those two places, we don't know what Michael Penix is going to be in Atlanta, but I think John Harbaugh can put together the type of staff to identify what they want him to be and take him from there. So I think those are the two best places, and especially Atlanta, because of its ownership, is very good. I honestly don't see much of anywhere else unless he wants to go to Tennessee, which I think is another organization that can flip its fortunes pretty quickly if they get the right leadership in there, because Cam Ward is a very promising young quarterback.
Steve Wyche, NFL Network's chief national reporter. You've been so generous with your time, Steve. We really appreciate you making the time during this very, very busy week for it. Do we look forward to seeing you in Santa Clara for the Super Bowl? And what do you make about coming to the Bay and spending another Super Bowl at Levi Stadium?
Love the Bay. Love the Bay. Yeah, I will be in San Francisco, Santa Clara for the Super Bowl, but first I will be in Seattle for that Seahawks-Niners game. Coverage will be on NFL Network on Saturday. And then Sunday on our game day preview show, which is actually on the NFL channel, right? We have a separate channel on Roku and Tubi and on the NFL app. I will be on there previewing Sunday's games.
Well, make sure you spend your Sundays with Steve. Steve knows what the best game is.
He does.
It's Seahawks. It's Niners. We're very excited about it.
Yeah.
We really appreciate you taking the time, Steve. Have some fun, safe travels, and we look forward to seeing you in the Bay very soon.
Great. Thanks for having me on, guys.
See you, Steve.
Absolute pleasure. Steve is the best. Man, that was a treat to go around the NFL with him, one of the most established NFL reporters out there.